Okay, so what do you consider like the most important piece of gear that you had with you at Moab?
Oh, jeez. I mean, I think overall, my most important piece of gear is my running vest.
Okay.
Right. I mean, it's full of other important pieces of gear,
Right.
but you know, especially if you're going to get into any of the ultra distances, you're going to need a vest at some point. When I first started, like my first 50 miler, I wore waist belts. There's just so many issues with that. Anything from, you know, like kind of imbalance on your hips and your pelvis to chafing.
Okay.
But mostly just like the capacity of your running vest is important. The you know, the fit of your vest. A lot of vests, depending on how they're designed and how they're shaped and how broad your shoulders are and your chest and things like that, they can like impact your breathing and impact, you know, things like back pain and stuff like that. So just for me, I've tried a lot of different ones. For Moab, it's hard because you need quite a bit of capacity, but you also don't want to be trying to run with like a backpacking backpack, right? So I wore the Salomon Advancement 12 liter, and the reality is so
they're awesome.
I actually fought it for a long time because it didn't look like it could hold as much as it can, and I didn't love that the pockets were open. I thought things would fall out, but the reality is like it is so freaking annoying to be dealing with. You're running down a trail and you've got a zipper back here and you're trying to get a snack and you're like, you know. And so I really love it. It's just, the important thing for me in a vest is actually the upfront capacity compared to the in the back. Because if it's in the back, I'm not going to touch it.
Right.
So it doesn't matter if
you have to take the whole thing off.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if there's a bunch of room in the back for calories, because I'm not going to eat them because they're not accessible to me. You know, it sounds silly, but it's true, right?
Yeah.
So as like the simplest and most accessible we can make things, the better. So with the Salomon, you know, the water bottles sit up high. On the men's vest, on the women's vest, there's longer straws, so that it's not rubbing on your chest. And so you can literally just kind of like do this and drink out of your water bottle. There's room for a 2-liter bladder. There is a lot of room in the back, so I would carry like my emergency gear in there. I'd carry extra layers in there. I carried a Garmin InReach from Moab because there's not cell service for almost the entire course. So if something did happen, like, or if I needed to communicate something to my crew. But otherwise, like all my nutrition, everything is up front. And you know, the great thing is there's the water bottle holders pockets, but then there's pockets in front of that and pockets in front of that, and then giant side pockets that go all the way across the back. So you could like stuff a layer in there, for example, or a hat or whatever, without actually taking the vest off. You could fit so much stuff. It's incredibly stretchy, so easy to kind of dig around. And the only downside to that was I definitely at times was carrying more than I needed to because I had the space.
Right.
So you want to be careful about that, right? Like there are some bags that are like, and packs that are kind of like these bottomless pits, and it seems great, but you do want to give yourself some limits. Which is why I didn't wear something like a fast packing pack, because if I had the space to fill it, I was going to fill it.
Right.
But yeah, vest is absolutely something that you want to be comfortable with, confident in, have a system, right? So especially like for me and my crew, it's like I would always keep things in the same pockets, right? Like electrolytes always go here, cough drops always go here, more liquid snacks always go here, like dry snacks always go here, so that way, you know, we all knew like what should we wear, and you don't have to get that crazy about it, but you know, it can make things just smoother and more seamless.
Well, I'm sure when your brain is not
Yeah,
exactly working,
exactly.
as long as
So
everything
then-
is exactly where it
So
should
if my
be.
brain's not working, then I can reach just like muscle memory, like, oh, I know electrolytes should be in here, instead of like, oh dear God, where are they?
Yeah.
And then it's not true for every race, but definitely in 200 trekking poles.
Yeah, I use
would be
trekking
my
poles
number
for
2.
everything.
Yeah, and I didn't know for a long time that they do make light trekking poles, right, specifically for running, because the reality is like backpacking trekking poles are really actually quite heavy.
Yeah.
So the Black Diamond,
Carbon Z?
Yeah, they have, and there's a few variations. Some of them are cheaper or more expensive because they're not totally carbon, but they're super, super light. They're easy to fold up. I would say
I have a pair. I love them.
Yeah, and then the Solomon pack, there is an option.
I've got the quiver.
Yeah, so there's a quiver, which is like a Robin Hood type thing that you can stick them in.
Yeah.
Or what I did, because all the quivers were continuously sold out, was there's partly I left my poles with my crew for the first 70 miles because it was really flat. So I would have just it was a waste. And then I picked them up because I wouldn't see them until after the big climb up Shea Mountain. But you can strap them in the front,
right,
in the inside of your water bottles, and it sounds like that would be really in your way, but it really isn't. I've done it before.
Okay.
And then you can strap them down the back. The only thing is I find that with the back straps for the poles, they're kind of actually against your back, like below the vest, and so I think there's definitely a risk of chafing there, so I don't like that approach as much. Ultraspire has a vest where you can put them down in the back and they do stay off your back, and that's my go-to vest for 100 milers. But yeah, trekking poles are crucial. It doesn't matter if it's hilly or not, because the reality is the point is that you're changing up the muscle groups that you're fatiguing, and so instead of just all your legs, you can put your arms and your shoulders into it, and it can really help. And so I carried my trekking poles. I used them from about miles 80 to the end. And even going downhill, you can use them to kind of break yourself a little bit and really take some pressure off your IT bands. So yeah, I think there's people that are like, oh, I never use trekking poles, that's weak or whatever, and that's just honestly stupid. That's fine if you want to fatigue your legs all day, but the reality is it's just a tool in order to help you gain a little bit more endurance.
And you need to check, because some races don't allow them, right?
Yeah, I've never experienced that, but there are some. So for example, Run Rabbit Run, 100 miler, they used to have a special division where if you were in the rabbit division, you could not use trekking poles, and then in the hare division you could, and the prize money eligibility and things like that were different. I wouldn't say it's very common, but it does occasionally happen. But I haven't run into it.
So tell us about what races you've done. What how many 100 milers, how many 50 milers, etc.
So I started with my first 50 miler, which was flat, which I don't necessarily recommend, back in 2015, spring 2015. And then I actually didn't run another ultra until until the following fall, so not the immediate fall after, but fall 2016. I ran my first 100 miler, and it's a big difference. So before my first 50 miler, I had run a couple road marathons, and because I chose a flat 50, it wasn't that different. It was just a lot longer. And but that was kind of my first reality check of you really do need to fuel differently, because in my training I had just done goos and gummies and liquids, and it was really insufficient when it came to the actual race. Had to break down and start eating things. But the jump from 50 to 100 was it was an experience. My first 100 was miserable. I didn't really, it was hot. It was in Arkansas. It was the Arkansas Traveler. And it is a great course, I'll say. It's a great 100 for a beginner. But what you have to know is that even though it's on Forest Service road, it's really packed and rocky. So the pounding, the impact is more serious than a single track 100. And then it can be, even though it's October, you're still in Arkansas, so it can be hot and humid as hell. So I actually got really lucky that year in that it was 60s and 70s, but it was still really humid. And coming from Wyoming, where it's really dry, I wasn't used to that, and so the big mistake that I really made was that I didn't change my socks. And they got really wet with sweat and humidity, and my feet just became like hamburger meat, and they got so painful. And I just didn't know any better. I'd never heard of anybody doing that, and I didn't know about electrolytes, which turned out to be okay in the sense it wasn't that hot. But there's just a lot of things I just never heard of, right? Like I'd been training kind of in a bubble, right? I hadn't been like talking to people or consulting people, and you want to be careful with that because there's a lot of people like out on the internet and Facebook groups are just going to give you advice when it doesn't mean it's good advice.
Right.
And so, but I did, I definitely learned more about nutrition that race. I was more adventurous, like, okay, yeah, I'll try that, and overall it was a good experience, but I the thing that I was most kind of unhappy with was like mentally, I just, like, you're so physically exhausted that you also lose the capacity to like mentally regulate yourself. Okay. At least for my first race, like I was in tears, like late in the race, I was just like blabbering like a small child. Like I was, looking back, like I was really embarrassed at the way that I treated like my pacers and things like that, because I just, like, I didn't have it in me to keep my shit together. Yeah. And so that is actually the biggest thing that I tried to work on between my like first and second and third 100 was like mental fortitude. Honestly. Yeah, I've
heard that's a big thing. Like,
it really
if you can nail that down, then you can do pretty much anything.
Yeah, and a lot of that has to do with the physical training, I have to say, right? Like,
right, sure.
Like, as I got my foot care down, like it's there's less of a toll on your mental exhaustion and things like that. Like as you fine tune your nutrition, you're less likely to get hangry and upset and things like that. But yeah, that is one of the big things that I really have tried to get in check. It's like, what is, sometimes you just need to like let it out, right? That definitely happened to me during Moab, around mile like 150. I wasn't upset with them, but I just told my pacer, I was like, look, I just need to cry for a minute, and I'm just gonna let it happen because I just need to, and then I'll be fine. And he's like, okay. And and so like it's one thing to like preface it and be like, this is what's happening. It's another thing to just kind of fall apart, right? With no real gain. So my second 100 was actually the Traveler again. Okay. Unfortunately, it was way hot. So it was like 90% humidity. Ooh. And and I really wasn't big into electrolytes still by then. A lot of people aren't in general, but I needed a lot of salt. And I unfortunately made another mistake in foot care, which was that I was starting to get like a hot spot. And I let a friend tape my feet, but she was not like a PT or anything like that. Like, you don't just want to let, she had really good intentions. Sure. But you don't just want to let anybody put tape on your feet. And the big mistake was she put it all the way around. Okay. Which is bad because as your foot swells, it starts to constrict. And it, if you have a hot spot, it's okay to put tape there, but you want it to be a certain kind of tape. Leukotape is usually the best. And you just want it on that hot spot. Okay. You really don't want to be doing any kind of wrapping.
How do you get it to stay? I mean, I would imagine with your feet being
Leukotape is, clean them first, dry them the best you can, and then Leukotape is really designed to stick on the skin. Okay. Similar to like KT tape, like you don't really see it falling off, just the way that it's made. But yeah, you do always want to clean. Like I always use, if I'm changing socks or anything like that, use like a baby wipe on my feet first. Don't let any grit get in there. But yeah, so that happened, and so ultimately that actually made it worse because then that tape held a lot of heat and caused more blisters. Okay. And then I was just not prepared for the heat, honestly. And I don't know that I could have been, coming from where I was coming from, but I made it through, and I did, mentally it did go better. I definitely, I think I treated my crew and pacers better, but it still wasn't perfect by any means. And I ended up butting up really close to cutoffs. Okay. That was another nutrition one. That's the race where I started doing ramen and like broth. Okay. And that really helped with the salts and things like that.
Do you do pickle juice?
I do now, yeah. I hate the taste of it, but I have to say it works really well. Okay. There are good electrolytes in pickle juice, but there's also like a feedback mechanism with muscle cramping and like the vinegar. Oh, okay. Where you're kind of sending signals effectively to your body to say like, don't cramp these muscles. Oh.
So you kind of choke it down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do. Oh yeah, because you can buy the little shot bottles, and I just kind of.
Yeah.
But I do find that it works well. Yeah. It's not an end all be all. Like I still would always use background electrolytes. Like I take in a very diluted electrolyte, no matter what, and then depending on heat and things like that, I'll supplement with salt tabs and pickle juice.
Okay.
Because if you're just taking salt tabs, you're not getting. Generally, they only have sodium and potassium, and you also need things like magnesium, for example, which is what helps your muscles relax.
Right. Calcium.
Yeah, there's a lot of different. So, hammer and Duralites. There's definitely other electrolytes out there, but those are pretty diluted. I actually put 2 tablets in a water bottle, and I do like the lemon lime fizzy one, and it's not very strong. There's no calories associated with it, but I find that to be a bonus because then I don't have to worry about upsetting my stomach.
Sure.
You know, there are other things like Tailwind, for example, but if you get sick of them, then how are you intaking your electrolytes?
Right.
So you always want to have like an alternate mode of delivery, kind of.
Have you ever made your own electrolyte? I make my own.
I haven't, just because I like what I have and it works, and it's actually really not that expensive.
Okay.
Some things really are, but
I found they're kind of expensive.
yeah, but the Endurolites really aren't, and I
Okay.
don't go through them nearly as heavily in training as I do in racing.
Okay.
So, and then the salt tabs, like I use Salt Stick, and it's like really cheap for like a whole 60 capsule bottle.
Okay.
So, but yeah, you definitely can. Again, it's just like wanting to make sure you also get those kind of like lesser known.
Yeah, I have potassium, calcium, magnesium, and sodium. Is that all I have? And I powdered.
Yeah.
And I just, weigh them out and figure out the exact mix and put them in like a mason jar.
Yeah.
And shake it up, and then I just take like a quarter teaspoon and throw that in my liquids.
Yeah, and that totally works. I just I haven't been that ambitious about. I'm more dedicated to like trying different food solutions, I would say.
Yeah.
But yeah, I actually learned about pickle juice in my my 5th 100, which was the Zion 100, because it was another really hot race, and I was actually running for a time through the desert in the heat of the day with a firefighter from Texas. And so this guy's used to being hot and toasty in heavy equipment, and he's the one who told me about pickle juice. He was like, this is what we use, like at work. And it's the only thing, that really keeps like the cramps away and things like that. I was like, it's disgusting.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not a pickle fan.
Yeah.
And, but actually at Zion, they had like, the same way you have a water cooler dispenser, they had pickle juice dispensers.
Really?
Yeah, it was very
interesting.
I mean, they were prepared in that regard, and I was like, okay, I'll try. And then they had you can order little bottles anywhere from like a few ounces to like the 8-ounce ones to take with you. So I grabbed a couple of those, and they definitely were really effective. Anytime I noticed like any kind of like super minor cramping creeping in, like just squash that right away with that. So yeah, done 5 100s in really different conditions. Tunnel Hill 100 was super cold. Flat.
The Tahoe is?
No, Tunnel Hill.
Oh, okay.
It's a PR course, really. Okay. It's kind of like a gravel bike path. And
okay.
I didn't love it from a muscular perspective. It's really monotonous, and flat is its own kind of hard in the sense that you're just like pounding in the same way the whole time. But I did it to try to go faster. Okay. Try to work on speed. And then the Love It 100, which is by far my favorite. That's in Arkansas as well, on the Lake Washita.
Are you from Arkansas?
No, I'm not.
All these Arkansas races.
I have friends in Arkansas.
Okay.
And so they drag me into the running community, it's a really awesome community. Yeah. They have a ton of different races, and Love It it's a lot of up and down. It's like, depending on your GPS, 18 to 20,000 feet of gain. It's a lot. Yeah. And I signed up for it on purpose because that scared me. Okay. And like, I was getting more comfortable with the 100-mile distance, and it's like, okay, let's do the distance plus some other factors.
Sure.
And I absolutely loved it. Like, you know, I actually really enjoy races, a lot of climbing, and it was great. It was super wet, so we had like hip deep creek crossings the whole time.
Yeah.
My feet were so wet, and it starts. You go through multiple nights because it starts at night. It starts like Friday evening.
Okay.
So you're immediately in the dark, which I actually loved because then right as you're getting sleepy, instead of the sun going down, the sun is coming up.
Yeah.
I would 100% do it again. It was so great. And it's February in Arkansas, so it was legitimately like 60 degrees.
Okay.
And, you know, really pleasant in that regard. And a small race. I mean, we're talking like 20 to 30 100-mile runners each year.
Okay.
There's a 100K that starts the next day. You do end up overlapping each other on the later part of the course. So you do see each other, which is kind of nice. But you would never know that it was that small. Like the aid stations go all out. You would think it was a race with 250 runners. I mean, really, really, really well done.
Huh. Okay.
100% would go back.